Hi, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome along to Sportsbet Television with Paul Alster here and your horse racing selections looking ahead to Saturday, the 9th of October, where the seasons are changing. We're seeing the back end of the racing on the flat schedule on turf, and we're seeing the jumpers starting to get going, which I suppose if I was press is probably my first love, although I love it all, but it's great to see some really good jumpers back on the scene this weekend in Britain. And increasingly over the next few weeks, we'll be concentrating our gaze on the jumping game. But we've got quite a few of interest here on the flat today. If you're new to the service, then please press the subscribe button just below this screen and you'll be kept in touch with all my selections, which invariably are at good each way odds, some of them very big each way odds, and that has really been the USP as far as this sports bet service has been concerned, certainly over the last year or so. So if you're looking for some big prize ones for this weekend, pin your ears back. We'll have some interesting ones for you. And overall, over the last year, it's been a big success story. There are always ups and downs along the road. That's the way punting goes. And last week, well, it wasn't a disaster by any means, but it wasn't particularly special. It was a slight losing week. We saw Dakota Gold put up at 5-1 each way. It was back to shorter, but it held on for the place money when finishing third at Ascot. Mojo Maker ran well at Redcar, 9-1 shot each way for the fourth place, which counted. So that was a nice little profit on Mojo Maker. And it looked as though the selection on Quickthorn at 11-2, the subject of a big gamble, was at least going to pay for the place, as he raced prominently most of the way, only to fade in the last 100 yards, agonizingly, finishing fourth at Ascot. No Speak Alexander didn't run her race at Newmarket, and she's subsequently been retired. So we wish her and her connections all the best. She certainly doesn't owe us anything after that 25-1 win at Leopardstown a couple of weeks earlier. And then, of course, the Arc, what a race that was. Well, as you would have heard, I was fancying a bit of a shock, and I went with Rabihar, who never really got into it. She just didn't really run her race. One of those things. The German star, Torquato Tasso, well, he was just amazing. I thought it was a marvelous performance. 80-1. There you go. That was the one that got away. Anyway, if you're looking for shorter prices, then I've also started tipping on another YouTube channel at freebets.com. Check that out. More to the fore of the market. Horses that are rather more obvious, but ones that I still feel are offering value at the odds that are displayed. Anyway, we'll move on now with our four for this week, and I'll take you first to York and the Knavesmire. And they're going a bit testing there up at York, soft ground. The 202 race is the 6 furlong listed Rockingham Stakes. Now, this is for 2-year-olds, and there are 14 set to go. And unusually for a listed race, there isn't an outstanding candidate on the figures, and they're betting around 5-1 the field at the time of this recording, which is done just about Friday lunchtime. Now, Canonized is the highest rated horse in the field for Red Hot William Haggis, who sent out a remarkable 8 winners last Saturday. That was an astonishing day for him, even by his high standards. And you'd have to respect Canonized, who was only beaten a short head in a Group 3 at Ayr last time out, admittedly on good ground. We'll soon see if this one is still as effective on the soft ground. And of course, coming to the end of the season, as we saw with one or two of the runners last week, some horses are just beginning to get a bit tired and they're just tailing off and losing their interest in the game. So you can never be quite sure. It's always a tricky time for punters. Now, the other 5-1 joint favourite is Ever Given for Tom Dascombe and Richard Kingscote, who's become something. This horse has become a sales race specialist. I think he's run in 3 of them. He won over the course and distance at the Ebor meeting, a very valuable sales race. And then he was only beaten a neck in the Doncaster sales race at the Ledger meeting. So he's been a wonderful money spinner for connections, and he's likely to go well again here. Allo Taibi for the Gosdens. Now, this one is quite interesting. It won on its debut at Newbury, then was second at odds on in an Ascot novice, just dropping back in trip here. So you've always got to respect the Gosdens. And Hello My Darling for George Bowie, who's done so well this season, George. And this one's also run a number of seriously good races, including when third at Chantilly in a Group 2 in July. It was also a good third to our selection, a 16-1 shot. Remember that one, Flaming Rib, at the York Ebor meeting, and it's since been second in a listed race. I think it was the champion 2-year-old race up at Ripon. So some interesting horses, but the one that I've gone for here is called GISBURN, who is trained by Richard Hannon and is the mount of Sean Levy. Richard, of course, an excellent trainer. I really particularly like him with his 2-year-olds. He's got a real knack, as did his father before him, of getting the best out of his 2-year-olds. And this one is a colt by Ribchester, who's doing really well, and he's a half-brother to a 6-furlong listed winner. He wasn't a cheap purchase by any means, costing £88,000. And he was an eye-catcher on his debut when he finished 4th, and he was only beaten a length and a half on debut by the horse that won the Coventry Stakes next time, which was Berkshire Shadow. So right from the start, this horse was up against quality opposition. He then went to Newbury in May, and he absolutely belted up there. He won by 6 lengths at Newbury, very impressive. And significantly, that was the only time he encountered any give in the ground on good to soft, and he seemed to really revel in it. It's a very eye-catching horse, a bonny chestnut with a big white face, white socks. I promise you, you won't have a problem picking him out. He normally races close to the pace as well. But he had a bit of a disappointing run after that Newbury race when he was only 6-1, one of the market leaders for the Group 2 Coventry Stakes. That was on good to firm ground. He just never stretched out and possibly got a little bit jarred up. Not quite sure why, but he's been off since then. Probably needed to grow a little bit more, but that fast ground, I think, didn't suit. And they've been patient. They've waited for the easier ground. And 116 days later, he's going to take his chance at York on Saturday. Now, this horse looked a real serious prospect, and I can't believe there isn't still the ability there. He is well regarded, and at 15-2 each way at the time of this recording, and that's for 4 places with Sporting Index. You can get each way for 5 places, actually, if you can bet with Sky Bet. And remember to shop around and try and get the best price you can, looking at the odds comparison site. And of course, this is an early show as far as the market goes, more than 24 hours ahead of the race. So there's going to be plenty of fluctuations, and you may well get bigger. But that's my first selection, GISBURN, in the Rockingham Stakes, the 202 race at York on Saturday. And then we go jumping at Chepstow, roller coaster track, a remarkably undulating track. If you've never been there, it really is like a roller coaster. And the 225 race there is a real corker. It's the Native River Handicap Chase over just about 3 miles, 14 runners, good ground. And it's wonderful to see so many old favourites coming back to be reacquainted with us ahead of what's going to be a great season, I'm sure, over the jumps. And Christian Williams, who does really well at Chepstow, has got a strong hand, and he runs the Bet365 Gold Cup runner-up, the old Whitbread Gold Cup runner-up, Kitty's Light, who was really unlucky at Sandown in that very controversial race last spring. She's gone up £4, but she was really progressive last season. And he also runs Cap de Nord, who was a close 5th in that race, the Bet365 Gold Cup at Sandown, the one run by Potterman. You remember, it was really controversial when they were cannoning all over the place, particularly Potterman. Now, Neil Mulholland won this race in 2018 with the Young Master, and he runs a horse who won at Worcester in August. And this is Accelerator Express, who's gone up £9 for that run and goes into a better race here. So I think he's got a bit to prove, but he had run well on his previous start to his victory when second in the listed Summer Plate at Market Raisin, which is a pretty hot contest. Now, one of the dark horses in this race is trained by Nicky Henderson, surprisingly, and this is Brave Eagle. Now, he was 5th in the race last year, this very race, and then he fell after that in the rehearsal chase, which for us was a very memorable race because we tipped the winner there at 66-1. But anyway, Brave Eagle fell in that race, and he hasn't been seen since. So he's obviously had his problems, but he's a horse who tends to run rather well fresh, and he's gone down £3. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him put up a bold show. And it's a similar comment for Mr. Malarkey, a real old favourite. And significantly, he's trained by the Tizzards, who, of course, trained the great Native River, the Gold Cup winner, after whom this very race is named. He's got top weight, and this is first time out, but there wouldn't be a more appropriate winner than Mr. Malarkey, who tends to run his races throughout the year, really consistent on all sorts of ground. But it's almost a year since those that have been following me from way back might remember I tipped a horse called Frodon, great horse Frodon, to win first time out last season at the Cheltenham, the first meeting of the year, at the October meeting. And that was when he ran for the very first time in a handicap. Of course, he went on to win the King George after that. But there's a horse here who gives me a similar feel, and that one is Real Steel, who's trained by Paul Nicholls and is the mount of Harry Cobden. Now, this horse has been very classy on his day, originally trained by Willie Mullins, who did really well with him, as you would expect. And you may very well recall the 2020 Cheltenham Gold Cup, the second of Album Photos Gold Cups. And in that race, Real Steel came around the home turn and loomed up to join the leaders at the second last, going better than anything. He was a very big price that day, and he just didn't quite get home. He started to run out of gas going to the last, and he didn't get up the famous Cheltenham Hill, a bit like my all-time favourite horse. Wayward Lad could never get home up that hill. So Real Steel has a lot of class about him, and 3 miles on an easier track, I think, is pretty much ideal for him. And this is a horse who has run some good races, originally for Willie Mullins. Then he moved to Paul Nicholls. Now, he's only had 3 starts, and his first start was very promising when he was a respectable third in the Grade 2 1965 chase at Ascot, behind the very useful Imperial Aura. But then he ran 2 poor races and was pulled up on both subsequent starts. Admittedly, they were both in Grade 1s, in the King George behind Frodon. And then after a 3 or 4 month break, he was pulled up in the Aintree Betway Bowl as well. Now, he pulled up very awkwardly at Aintree, and he did appear to have breathing problems. So no surprise that he's had wind surgery during the summer. And I think they've just decided to start all over again with him. And this is his first start since the wind surgery. And in the past, he has gone well fresh. He's won first time out in the past. And the significant thing is the handicapper has decided to drop him £7 since his last run at Aintree. So he's now rated 154. And this is a horse who was running off 166 early last season. And I think that is what has tempted Paul Nicholls to run this horse for the first time ever in a handicap. And it was a similarly tempting situation that I think put him into Frodon, putting him into a handicap at Cheltenham. So although Paul also runs Truckers Lodge, who is not without a chance, I do think that as long as the breathing up has worked, that Real Steel could be a blot on the handicap. And at the time of the recording, he's 6-1 each way for 4 places. The only firm up are William Hill's. So good for them giving us a guide. It may turn out that he goes bigger, but I think Real Steel is going to run a massive race at Chepstow in the 225. And then I'll take you on to Newmarket, where we've got a brilliant race. The 255 is the Group 1 Dewhurst Stakes. It is always an outstanding contest. It is over 7 furlongs, of course. It's good to soft ground at HQ, and there are 8 runners. Now, really, this race centres around the outstanding 2-year-old of Godolphin's Native Trail, who, is 3 from 3. Charlie Appleby trains him, and he looked really quite brilliant when he won last time out in Ireland in the Group 1, where he beat the previously unbeaten Aidan O'Brien trained Point Lonsdale, and he quickened away from him Point Lonsdale was stood still. It was a marvellous performance. He'd won prior to that as well in the Group 2 Superlative Stakes. So this is a horse who really could be anything. They're very excited about him, of course, and he may well be a superstar. But he's odds on. There's no value betting him as far as I'm concerned. And we've seen too many of these hot pots over the years at odds on in top Group 1 races, particularly 2-year-olds, getting stuffed. And it might well happen. And I actually think that on a line through Masakela, who was only beaten a short head by Native Trail on Native Trail's second victory, he doesn't have a lot in hand. A Bayside Boy, who is trained by Roger Varian, and who himself was only beaten ahead by Masakela in a listed race at Newbury before last time out, going on to spring a bit of a surprise when beating the Queen's Reach for the Moon in a Group 2 race, the Champagne Stakes at Doncaster. So there is a line there that suggests that, okay, Native Trail may well have improved a lot since that time he beat Masakela, but you just wouldn't want to be going in too heavy. if you were wanting to be daft enough to bet the odds on, which is a quick way to the poor horse over the long term, of course. Then you've got the other horse that really is being talked about a great deal, and this is the Ger Lions trained Straight Answer, who is very, very exciting. He's 2 from 2 in Ireland, and he looked a real superstar when he won last time out. I was presenting the Irish racing, and I was really waxing lyrical about the way he absolutely coasted away from a decent field and won really, really well last time out. Now, it is fascinating to see that they've decided to take on Native Trail. They obviously feel that they can give him a race, and good luck to them. I think Straight Answer will be a serious horse. If he doesn't win on Saturday, he's going to do well next season. But I think there is a value angle in this race, and my selection is called GLOUNTHAUNE and is trained by Aidan O'Brien and is a mount of Ryan Moore. And I think this is really a horse who is a complete dark horse and could be anything. Now, Aidan has got a wonderful record in this particular race. He's won it 5 times in the last 8 years alone. And last year, he won it with St. Mark's Basilica, who, as we know, went on to be a superstar this year. He's also won it recently with the likes of US Navy Flag, Churchill, Air Force Blue, and War Command. Now, Aidan's Point Lonsdale was unbeaten when he went up against Native Trail in Ireland. And there were a few long faces when Point Lonsdale was beaten pointless by Native Trail. But the one good thing about it is that Aidan O'Brien must have a wonderful line as to how close his horses are, given what happened to Point Lonsdale against Native Trail. And I think that that is really interesting. And what's also interesting is that in these Group 1s, particularly in Britain, Aidan tends to run mob-handed 3 or 4. He's not worried about running plenty because he likes to give himself plenty of chances. And I think it's significant that here he chooses to run only the one horse, and that is GLOUNTHAUNE, who looks on the face of it to have a very tough task. 350,000 guinea Kodiak colt, who won on his debut at the Curragh in April over 6 furlongs. That's some time ago, and he's inexperienced. He hasn't seen a race course since. But the horse he beat that day was Castle Star. And Castle Star has gone on to prove himself to be a very, very good horse. And you may recall that 2 weeks ago, I tipped Castle Star for the Middle Park Stakes. He was very unlucky in running, only beaten a neck or half a length, and finished second there in the Group 1, having run well throughout the season in group races. Now, he beat Castle Star that day, did GLOUNTHAUNE at the Curragh, and Castle Star came to the race with a previous run and experience. GLOUNTHAUNE had never seen a racecourse before. So in hindsight, it really was an exceptional run. Now, what is interesting as well to note is that 2 weeks ago, Aidan O'Brien ran a horse in the Cheveley Park Stakes, a filly who had only had 1 run on virtually the opening day of the Irish season, and she was unconsidered. Everybody thought, he's just testing the waters with her, and she came through 10 a Brisbane, and she won at double figure odds, and she beat all the hot pots, and she beat them really well, steaming up the stands rail. And this has got a feeling of deja vu. And Ryan Moore is back on again. And I think that they really do expect GLOUNTHAUNE to run a good race. And reading 1 or 2 bits in Ireland, I think there's quite a decent vibe about this horse. And he's overpriced at 12 to 1 each way with all firms. I'd much rather bet the 12 to 1 each way and make a profit for a place on GLOUNTHAUNE than take the odds on at 8 to 11 about Native Trail. And even if Native Trail wins, good luck to him. It'd be always great to see a really good horse go unbeaten through a season, but I don't think there's any value there. And I think there is with GLOUNTHAUNE. So I take you on now to my final selection, just to say I was trying to figure out the Cesaro Witch and very nearly decided to put up a selection, but I couldn't decide between 2 horses. And in the end, I decided not to make a recommendation because I just could not be, certain enough or positive enough. The 2, just for the record, if you want to know, were Platform 19 and Nicholas T. They're both decent odds, but I'm not putting them up. Anyway, to York for my final selection. The 3:15 is the valuable Coral Sprint Trophy, 6 furlongs, 22 runners. Again, loads of old favourites who've been entertaining us and keeping us on our toes all season, none more so than Gulliver for David O'Mara, who's actually won this very race the last 2 years and obviously goes particularly well at the track in the autumn on soft ground. And that's his conditions again. He's off the same mark as last year. And in a wide open race, he's the 8-1 favourite at the time of this recording, and he's sure to be thereabouts. Now, there's a fascinating Irish raider called Laugh a Minute, trained by Adrian McGuinness. And Adrian, of course, sent out that horse to win the Prix de la Baie just last week. So he knows where he stands with his sprinters, and the yard's in good form. We've got the hat-trick-seeking Nomadic Falls, who's a stable companion of Gulliver's, and he's also won over the course and distance of late. Capote's Dream for Tom Ward is another hat-trick seeker. Tom Ward, an up-and-coming trainer who's done really well this season. The Stewards' Cup winner, Comanche Falls, is out again. He won't be far away. And the course specialist, Grand Sort for Tim Easterby, Copper Knight, is another in the lineup. But I've gone really out of left field here with Volatile Analyst, who's a big price. Keith Dalglish trains. Callum Rodriguez is on board. This horse, 3 from 11 in his career so far, is a very lightly raced 4-year-old. Possibly not the easiest horse to train, but Keith Dalglish is a very good and I think an underrated trainer. I really do. Now, this horse ran twice as a juvenile. He won on his debut at Ayr, and then he finished 4th in the Group 2 Richmond Stakes at Glorious Goodwood. And that shows how highly they rated him as a 2-year-old. He won first time out as well as a 3-year-old off a marker when he had a rating of 102. And then he lost his way the next 2 runs, just didn't run at all well and was gelded. Now, this year, he was pretty slowly away at York over a mile early in the season. And then he was an eye catcher, finishing off well. So you would have thought maybe a mile or more was his trip. But next time out, he returned to York over 7 furlongs in soft ground. And he showed a great turn of foot from the 2 down to the furlong pole and went 5 or 6 lengths clear of his rivals before just getting tired in the closing stages. But he hung on to win by nearly 2 lengths. He seems to love York. And he seems to love soft ground, and he's got a bit of pace about him as well. Indeed, last time out, he ran in the Ayr Gold Cup, and he was bang there at the furlong pole, chasing the horse over on the far side that eventually finished second, whose name has just disappeared from my mind. In the end, he faded, but plenty of use made of him. But I think here, in the soft ground, off a really strong pace, I think he's going to go really well. I really do feel that he was on his way back with that good run at Ayr last time. And at the time of this recording, he's 33-1 each way. And that's for 7 places with Sky Bet. If you have accounts with William Hills or Betfred or Boyle Sports, they're offering 6 places. And I would not be at all surprised if he went much bigger, 40s or even 50s may be available come the day of the race on Saturday once trading really starts to hot up. But I'll be interested and expecting a Volatile Analyst to run very well, certainly outrun his odds in the 3:15 race at York on Saturday. And that is my final selection of my 4 for this week. Do remember, if you're looking for shorter prices, to maybe add 1 or 2 into a combination bets here and there, then I'm offering my thoughts as well at freebets.com. But for the time being, for me, Paul Alster, I'll wish you a great weekend. Have lots of fun. Enjoy your racing. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.